Greetings. This is the final iteration of my keyboard rig with the Genesis show to cover the Duke Tour from 1980. And there's some new pieces in here, and I am mourning. I don't know what stage of grief I'm in that we only have 2 shows left. This has been my favorite tour to play. The set list is challenging and fun, and audiences love it. And it's some of my favorite sounds: polysynths, lead synths, analog everywhere, still an organ. I mean, it's just a really cool rig that he had, and I'm gonna miss it. But I've updated it, so I figured you guys would be interested in it. I'm doing my own cinematography. You know, normally when there's a rig rundown, you're on stage and there's like a YouTuber interviewing you, and we don't have time for that when we get to these theaters. We do a lot of stuff ourselves. I set all my keyboards up, and it'll never happen. So bear with me with the more talking than playing and the cinematography. So one of the keys to updating this was, you know, when the Radial released their keyboard mixer, Key Largo, I got it instantly. I was like, that's what I want. 3 channels and a USB interface, effects loop, great. But it's weird. It's a pedal board, and it has pedal things that I never used. Then, of course, they listened to everybody, and they came out with the KL-8, which is rack mount. It has a 4th audio channel, which piggybacks with the USB and has separate channels, and it has an insert effects in addition to another type of effect input, which I will use for the 76 tour. So that was really great, really helpful to use. So what do I have going on here? Well, I still have on the left the Behringer vocoder VC340. It's an analog clone of the Roland VP330. It is missing an octave, and I'm actually glad for that, because it's easier for me to use. I do have to flip the octave switch during the set, and it's easy to forget about that. I'm running it stereo. It has an analog clone of the Ensemble, which is the Roland chorus based on the jazz chorus that they had. And I'm running it stereo finally. I wasn't before, but this has really opened things up as far as what I send to the sound man. So I have a stereo volume pedal, and that is all great. And then here's the organ that I did in another video, Krumar Mojo Classic Dual. It's the wooden looking one, not the black one with the case, which is really just a lid. And even though you see the Leslie blinking, I have it bypassed. That's the red light next to it. And it is running directly into my vintage Script Phase 100 from MXR. Look at the settings. Man, the most complaints I've gotten on my videos, and I get a lot of them, I'm okay, were the phaser settings. So there it is. Not the most intense out of phase 1, you know, but the 3rd position, I guess, about halfway speed. And guess what? That LFO speed knob, you know what? There. This show is going to be slower. Okay. Now, to my delight, this sounds exactly like the GSI VB3 2 plugin, because that's what it is. It's literally in that organ. And to a bigger surprise, the IK Multimedia Amplitude suite, I was using their Phase 100 when I was using the plug-in organ. Sounds really good. There's always been a little, at the end of the notches, a little weirdness that I didn't like in the plug-in, which is smoother on this, but it was really close. So that organ setup I had was a good one. The B3X plugin, however, I said in my organ video, did a thing where if you doubled the chords on the manuals, it made the gain really kind of crazy. I'm going to put this camera down and let you hear it on this. So if I do something like Afterglow, here's Here's the upper manual. Here's the lower manual. It doesn't double the gain. So I'd have to ride the volume pedal a lot. Now I can kind of play it like Tony did. So this is great, but it's not too different. What is fantastic about it is the waterfall of all these keyboards. Before, you know, I had like keyboard in a stand, keyboard sitting on top of it, X stand with this higher. And the audience, if you sat in the first few rows, you couldn't see how handsome I was. And this is so much easier to play in the cage and Follow You, Follow Me, which are both really hard songs to play. And I know a lot of you are going to be annoyed that I say that Follow You, Follow Me is as hard as In the Cage, but it is. And having this that close and that lower is really great. So this is my Arturia 61 key. I forget what the model is called, but I've used it in videos before. It's very slim. It's got like little wood cheek block things, so it matches this. And what I did, I put rubber padding on the underside of the Arturia that went a little deeper than the feet, and it sits perfectly on this Mojo. It's not going anywhere. So that's one less stand I need, and the keyboard is closer to me. USB is going to Mainstage, where I can control the Quadra polysynth, which I'll get into. And then USB is also going in MIDI in this. This is the Behringer 2600. So I use this for the lead section of the Quadra, and I use the plug-in for the poly section. And I can blend them. I have an on-off button for the samples. I have a tuner that I use to defeat the lead section and tune it during the show. And this sustain pedal, volume pedal, I'm just doing mono, but it controls the volume of the 2600 module, and with an expression to a dedicated expression input here, it fades out the poly section. And I've got the Quadra going from like Quadra to volume pedal to tuner. And this is an older, there's a newer Space Echo plugin from Boss, but this is the original one. And even though I don't think Tony used a delay on his Quadra leads in the 80s, it always sounds kind of dry to me. I have one on there just to give it a little life. So I think I'm cheating there, but I'm also making it kind of a hybrid to what he had in 78. All right, so Quadra leads. A big revelation for me kind of recently. Well, one, I need a fan behind it because on stage it was always going out of tune. I'm sorry if you were at one of those many shows that derailed things, but that's what happens. So I have a fan. And the other thing I was doing, because the Quadra had two separate portamento switches, which got that smeary sound that was so signature. I have 3 oscillators on the 2600. When the first 2 are in the mixer, the first 2 are, sorry about the focus, sawtooth waves. All right, going into the mixer. And then if I have the, those, and I have turn the portamento on, let's get like an In the Cage type sound. Now, the Quadra had, quote, presets, but it was really just on-off settings of the envelope. So Tony did that live, but I'm doing it over here. So it's pretty accurate to what he did. It's just in a different place. All right, so if I'm doing In the Cage, right, typical lead sound. But if I want like the smeary sound of the dual portamento, I just go yoink, and I put oscillators 2 and 3. By the way, they're all tuned closely, locked in. I turn this portamento off. You can have it on. And the lag processor is going to the third oscillator. So this is the third oscillator by itself. And that's not the portamento. That is the lag processor being a lag processor. But I had a problem. And when I did that trick, the tuning of the third oscillator was like, instead of being where it should have been, it was like offset. So I would have to tune like a home note. And then if I played outside of it, that was out of tune. And I just dealt with it. I just lived with it and hoped no one would notice. But of course everyone would notice, right? It was out of tune in a couple notes. So I was, you know, I'm a nerd and I like to read about this stuff. And I have a vintage Mini Moog, and you have to like stick a screwdriver in the back and calibrate it every once in a while. And I'm like, wait a minute, I could do that with these. And all these little rubber pads, you peel them off and you stick a little eyeglasses type screwdriver in there and you can do it. So I tuned the third oscillator with this lag processor setting on. So now it is in tune. Now, if I went to use this on another gig or for a session, that oscillator would be out of tune. So I suppose when I get done my 1980 shows, I will go back in and tune it and just use it in my studio and it would be solid. But now you get, and it's in tune. All right, that little warbling you heard was the LFO. So that was a game changer. I mean, suddenly I wasn't worrying about tuning, and it made this even more like the Quadra. So if I turn the sustain, the release envelopes all the way up, I get, you get that three sides live type sound. Now, speaking of the poly section, I have Duke's Travels up here, right? So if I'm gonna kick on the tuner, so here's, so there's my plug-in poly section, which is if you know about the Quadra, it's a divide down oscillator. It's almost like an organ. And Tony used it for like the brass chords on Behind the Lines. With the phase shifter on, he used it for like the intro to In the Cage and those quiet sections in Duchess. And then there's another, I forget what the key is. In One for the Vine, that section, he used it for that. He used it for that in One for the Vine. So I'm using the plug-in for that. Now, I am using the sample-based version from Synth Magic, third-party person, and it's for Native Instruments Contact. Now, I know that there is a newer Quadra plug-in. I get asked about it a lot. And frankly, I just don't like it. I mean, I think it's a neat plug-in. I think it has great... for the price, a lot of cool sounds, but for my purposes, that sound does not sound. In fact, it kind of does what the IK Hammond does. Is like if you bring in the two octaves, it like distorts, and it just doesn't sound like it to me. Maybe I haven't spent enough time. Maybe there have been some updates. Other things I didn't like about it are the duophonic mode, the way it behaves with portamento. It doesn't play right. It doesn't feel right, whereas I can get all of that here, which is pretty fantastic. So I don't use it. I use this other version. And the neat thing is I use the MIDI plugins in Mainstage to get things like the pitch bend and the arpeggiator. So when I'm playing, so here's the end of Duke's Travels, right? And I have the oscillator set wrong. So here it is. So ready? This is a pain to do one-handed. Well, okay. Do it this way. All right, so the 2600 and the Quadra have a portamento pedal. So if I don't have it on, I have the portamento off. Press the pedal down, right? So I'm doing these travels, and then there's the chord. So when I hold the chord down and it's monophonic, right? But I turn the arpeggiator on. So I have these little like Quadra poly on and off. So I have to, in the set, the lights coordinate with what I need right now. I'm not playing in the set, so it's a little weird. So it seems complicated, but I'm doing about as many live moves as Tony did. You know, when you have that Quadra, you got to do a lot of work. You get a lot of tweaking and all that stuff, turning layers on and off. So that's kind of nuts. I feel like I went too long with that, but oh well. Now, the last piece that I want to talk about is my brand new Sequential Prophet 10 Rev 4. It is great. However, it wasn't great for me when it came out. It was too expensive. I got this recently on sale, and I think the sale is over. So I got this a lot cheaper. The other thing that wasn't great initially was you couldn't layer like you could with a Prophet 10 with 2 manuals from the 80s. And then so an OS update allowed you to do that. Now I'm using this as a Prophet 5 for the 80 tour. So I haven't programmed any Abacab or Mama era tour sounds. But I took less than an hour and I sat with in iTunes the playlist from the BBC box set, and I made across less than 2 banks. I just went through with the original Prophet presets, tweaked them a little bit like Tony did, and I have all of my Duke Tour sounds. You know, so just at the start of my set, here's Deep in the Motherlode. That's based on the brass preset, and then the Deep in the Motherlode, that's based on the toy piano. The Squonk ending, which is another brass preset, and I switched the hold version to the original hold. And the other thing this OS did was it had an option where you could make it a 5-voice synth. So when I did my Squonk and Man on the Corner videos, which used the 5-voice with hold, I was playing my Prophet 6, and I just used a sustain pedal. And it didn't quite sound right. You know, when you have the 5 voices, I'm going to put the phone down again. You know, I play. You know, the 5 voices defeat the other. And then someone had told me in the comments of my videos, hey, there's an OS update where you can reduce the voices on the Prophet 6. This, I think you can only do either 10 or 5, which suits my purposes fine. So I'm going to tell you that my Prophet 6 sounds as good as this for Genesis sounds. There's things I love about this whole experience that I'm glad I have it. But I will be selling my Prophet 6 soon. If you want to buy it off of me, hit me up. But this is really great. I'm really proud. This is like the easiest synth to program. I mean, it just makes so much sense. So, finally, in the effects end, I have a vintage MXR stereo chorus, which is what Tony had switched to in 1980. I've seen pictures of it. Maybe he had more than one that he used in different settings. I have a generic stereo setting, and in the effects end of the radial mixer, this is going through it. All the computer sounds, so the CP70 and the poly synth. Now, the lead is not going through the chorus because it didn't. Thankfully, that's another reason why I don't use the plugin, right? I can use the plugin for the poly, which gets the chorus, and the lead does not. And then the organ after the MXR also gets the chorus. This does not get the chorus because it has its own. And I'm running stereo, and there it is. It's a big old beast of a setup, but it sounds really good. The other neat thing is my digital sounds, poly, Hammond, Yamaha piano, those digital things are warmed up by the analog chorus. So everything here has an analog stage, which is really what I like. And that's it, people. God, what a 20-minute video. If you made it to the end of this, bless you.